When Donald Trump returned to the White House, he promised the largest immigration crackdown in American history. Initial debate focused on deportations, mass removals, workplace raids, and border militarization. But as his second-term agenda has taken shape, a broader structural shift has emerged. Rather than prioritizing rapid removal alone, the regime is building the capacity to detain immigrants inside the United States on an unprecedented scale, including people with no criminal record and some who were admitted legally as refugees. Government data from last year reveals how enforcement patterns diverge from public rhetoric. An analysis of nearly 140,000 I-213 forms from January through mid-August found that 77% of individuals placed into deportation proceedings for the first time had no criminal conviction. The surge in arrests has largely involved people without criminal histories, underscoring how enforcement has expanded beyond the narrow category of serious offenders often invoked in political messaging. The crackdown has also been accompanied by deadly incidents and mounting judicial criticism. Newly released records show that a 23-year-old U.S. citizen, Ruben Ray Martinez, was shot and killed in Texas by a federal immigration agent during a late-night traffic stop that was not publicly disclosed at the time. His death was the earliest of at least 6 fatal shootings involving federal officers since the start of the second-term enforcement escalation. In other incidents, U.S. citizens Renee Good and Alex Pretty were killed in January by immigration officers during protests in Minneapolis. Federal courts have rebuked the regime's approach. U.S. District Judge Sunshine Sykes accused the government of terrorizing immigrants and recklessly violating the law in its drive to deport millions. She ruled that the regime has defied a prior order requiring that detained immigrants be given meaningful opportunities for release. In a sharply worded decision, she said the executive branch had extended its violence on its own citizens, while disregarding constitutional safeguards. Central to the policy shift is a February memorandum from the Department of Homeland Security directing officers to treat the one-year anniversary of refugee admission as a mandatory revetting point. Refugees who have not yet adjusted to lawful permanent resident status may now be required to report for reinspection. Failure to comply can result in arrest and detention. The memo, signed by leadership at Immigration and Customs Enforcement and U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, authorizes officers to maintain custody for the duration of the inspection and examination process. Unlike prior guidance dating to 2010, there is no defined time limit. Previously, missing the one-year green card application deadline was not itself grounds for detention. Immigration advocates argue that the new directive converts a bureaucratic milestone into a trigger for incarceration. The regime maintains that refugee status is conditional and subject to review, particularly in cases involving fraud or national security concerns, of which there are few. Refugee organizations counter that applicants already undergo years of screening before arrival, and that aggressive post-admission rescreening undermines the promise of safe haven. Controversy escalated around Operation Paris, post-admission refugee re-verification and integrity strengthening, which targeted thousands of refugees in Minnesota for renewed scrutiny. A federal judge temporarily blocked aspects of the operation, ordered releases, and criticized the detention of individuals who were legally authorized to live and work in the United States. Parallel to the refugee directive is a sweeping expansion of detention infrastructure. ICE has begun acquiring and retrofitting vast industrial warehouses in Social Circle, Georgia, Hagerstown, Maryland, San Antonio, Texas, and Surprise, Arizona. Planning documents outline a consolidation of more than 200 existing detention sites into 34 large government-owned concentration camps. 8 megacenters would each hold up to 10,000 detainees, while 16 additional hubs would house roughly 1,500 people each. The projected bed capacity approaches 100,000, more than double the historic congressional levels, at an estimated cost of $38 billion allocated for enforcement expansion. Critics note that warehouses are designed for storage, not long-term habitation. Converting them into detention centres raises concerns about ventilation, medical care, sanitation, and humane conditions. ICE says the facilities will meet national standards, which are already appalling, and create jobs. But local opposition has been significant. Officials in Social Circle warned that the proposed site could require more daily water than the city currently consumes. In surprise, business owners raised concerns about protests and impacts on nearby schools. Resistance has emerged even in conservative-leaning communities. Some Republican officials have questioned the scale and logistical strain of the facilities, though objections often focus on infrastructure and economics rather than detention policy itself. The most contentious element for the regime's approach is the potential for prolonged or indefinite detention. Under prior practice, refugees detained by ICE were generally released quickly or placed into formal removal proceedings. The new memo permits custody to continue throughout a rescreening process without a defined endpoint. Civil liberties advocates argue that this creates a detention category lacking clear statutory limits. Individuals whose status remains under review but not revoked may be confined while administration procedures unfold. The regime defends the policy as necessary to investigate misrepresentation and protect national security. Critics respond that such cases are rare and that broad detention authority treats legally admitted refugees as presumptive threats. ICE currently detains around 70,000 people on any given night. With new mega facilities coming online, that number could rise significantly. Analysts note that detention, unlike deportation, does not depend on foreign governments accepting returnees. It allows the executive branch to assert control domestically, even when removals are delayed or blocked by courts. The enforcement escalation extends beyond civil detention. DOJ prosecutors have pursued a high volume of criminal cases against protesters, immigrants, and others accused of assaulting or impeding federal officers during operations. In recent months, many of those cases have collapsed, dismissed, or ended in not guilty verdicts, after courts found insufficient evidence or video footage that contradicted officers' accounts. Defense attorneys described the pattern of aggressive charging and repeated defeats as unusual for federal prosecutors. Even when exonerated, defendants have faced mugshots publicized by the government, weeks in jail, and prolonged, expensive legal uncertainty. Financial dynamics further complicate the picture. Private prison corporations such as GEO Group and Core Civic derive substantial revenue from federal immigration detention contracts and have invested in expanding ICE-related services. Long-term, congressionally funded agreements to retrofit and operate facilities create durable revenue streams tied directly to detention levels. Critics argue that as bed capacity grows, so does institutional pressure to fill it, reinforcing detention as both policy instrument and profitable business model. Supporters describe the overhaul as modernization, replacing a fragmented network of private jails and short-term holding sites with centralized, government-owned facilities. Opponents see the construction of a permanent detention architecture capable of outlasting any single administration. Deportation is expensive, diplomatically complicated, and often constrained by litigation. Detention, however, can be expanded unilaterally within U.S. borders. Observers suggest the administration's strategy is evolving from removal alone to containment, holding people in custody for extended periods while legal battles supposedly proceed. The courts will ultimately determine how far the executive branch can extend detention authority under the new guidance. Yet the infrastructure is already rising, warehouse by warehouse. For critics, this marks a structural transformation, a vast centralized detention regime that could confine not only unauthorized migrants, but also refugees and other legally present immigrants. The clash now unfolding will shape the boundaries of executive power, refugee protection, and detention authority in the United States for years to come. I'm Anthony Davis. You can find me on the 5 Minute News YouTube channel and podcast, on Wednesdays co-hosting Uncovered on Global AF, on Legal AF, and on Sundays on The Weekend Show with MeidasTouch.
Love this video? Support independent media and unlock exclusive content, ad-free videos, and custom emojis by becoming a paid member of our YouTube channel today. You can also gift memberships to others. Let's keep growing together.